Hello everyone, and welcome to this, our first episode of the Photo Editor. My name is Matthew, and I'm very glad to have you with me. So, in this show, as discussed in the intro, I am going to be editing live in front of you a different image, and you'll get to see all the creative choices I make in real time. So right now I'm just looking through pictures of our little dog Heide, who's a little Havanese. She's quite mischievous. We love her very much. And so finding a photo that meets some good composition. This was taken of her, or these were taken of her at the park. And so a variety of wind conditions, and sometimes little results can get you surprised. At the moment I'm thinking probably this very nice, more traditional composed one is good, but I'll just keep doubling back just in case there is something that might look a bit more interesting. Or, no, I am thinking that this is probably the nicest one. So, I edit in Silver Effects Pro to begin with, which is a great software program. It's part of the Nikon collection. And the key thing they do is I'm able to process the photograph in black and white. One of the great things that I can do with it is that I can use color filters at the beginning. And so in black and white, red or orange and those types of filters, they adjust the color, or not the color obviously, but the intensity of the light and the shadow of the image. And it can work for different images. And this is the only part of editing that I do that applies equally to the whole picture. I believe that spot editing with a brush, for the most part, is best for photo editing, because all parts of the photograph have little different qualities, and your sort of typical Instagram filter approach may not always work in all sections. Now, looking through the different film types, so the sort of film simulators they have here, I can choose, again, the effects together with the filter. So, actually, that's not quite true, so what I said before. So, together with color filter and film effect, these are the two elements that I use to apply to the whole picture before I then spot edit it in Lightroom, which is the major software program that I use. Now, one of my favorite film simulators to use is Fuji Neopan Acros, and I think Fuji recently got rid of the real film, although they might be reintroducing a different version of it. But that actually led to a lot of film enthusiasts hoarding stock, and I got a couple rolls myself. So here we can spot adjust the brightness and some other effects. In the case of little Heidi here, we wanted to shine out a bit in the image, and see we can get her looking good and contrasty from the grass, but that doesn't mean that we're going to be ignoring the surrounding background around her, but it will have a bit of different editing to help attract the viewer's attention the way you want it. Okay, now that we have a copy that's been edited in Lightroom adjustments, I'm going to now do the spot editing. So let's get the screen nice and big. So on my keyboard, usually you just go straight to K, and that's a shortcut to use the brush effect. At the beginning, you always double click the effect word so that you clear all the settings and you can start anew. Now, at the moment, I'm just applying a neutral brush with no effects applied yet, and that zone where you've applied the brush, you can now retrospectively use the different effects such as texture and clarity to alter the picture where you've applied the brush. Now, often when you have things like grass or fur, it's a good thing to apply a heightened amount of texture, and alongside light, texture is actually a good way to control where the viewer is looking. Clarity as well, that can also sharpen the image quite a bit, and highlights, and it's good to invest a bit of knowledge in highlights and whites and how they're different. You can get a good idea watching the histogram how it changes when you alter those two functions, but focusing a bit more on clarity for now. We'll work on the light later. So when you're looking at the parts of your photo that are in focus and not in focus, you want to be careful playing around with the parts that are not as much in focus, because the idea of having sections out of focus is that you want to be drawing attention to your main subject, but also if you tamper with the parts that are out of focus a bit too much and can look a bit too grainy. So, and at the same thing with over clarifying the core sections, it can look too artificial. So, like, we've added a clarity to Heide's face, but adding a bit too much, it looks a bit too stark, almost like a graphic design, which we don't want. We want it to look, still have a bit of the cute, fluffy element, but still draw your attention to her face and around her front paws. So the highlights, particularly on her face, add a bit of a halo effect. So that gets us focused on where we want to be. Add a little less effect in her lower sections of fur to give it a bit of a natural gradient. It's important when you're using a brush to make sure that you have the size of the brush set large enough, because too small and it looks like you're almost just sort of scratching extra details that don't look very natural in the picture. And you can adjust afterwards where, like you do with a conventional paintbrush and your watercolors or oils, you can sort of work back a bit when you overcorrect too much, but you don't want to be creating almost graffiti-like streaks where you don't want them to be. Now in the background, I'm reducing a lot of the exposure because I want to create quite a, like I said, almost a religious type picture with a halo shining out against a dark background. And that's where reducing the exposure comes in handy. Got a bit too much highlight on the back, so I'm trying to fix that up. See if we can sharpen it just a little bit. Should have had the aperture a bit tighter so I had a bit more at the back, but that's alright. You can always take a new picture to improve on the qualities of one that you already like. Let's see. So again, whenever you're creating a new brush, it's good to reset all the effects by double-clicking the effect word, so you don't have to, if you want to change just a small part, you don't have to worry about ruining other sections that you're happy with. Just trying to reduce a bit of highlight now towards the rear of the fur. Let's see, that should be an okay amount. Okay, so that's a pretty decent image. The back of the fur is still a bit lighter than I'd enjoy, but sometimes taking away too much light can leave it looking a bit hollow and unnatural. But the nose is nice and appealing. The clarity and a bit of shine on the dark nose is good. See if we can reduce the exposure where we don't want it a bit more. Yeah, so around that grass where it doesn't quite match the lighting on the fur. And you can see the sort of the layover from the outer edges of the brush add a bit of that soft transformation, the feathering, which helps us give the natural look we want. Yeah. It is good afterwards to try looking at a full image, because when you're really tied into the creation of the image, you can get very focused on small parts, and you need to remember that someone looking at this in a book or a gallery space will always be drawn to the where you want them to first look, no matter how much of an enthusiast they are at looking at the extra details. but it is nice to pay attention to them. So I'm adding a bit of extra highlight on her eyes, see if we can make them pop out a little more. Havanese have a lot of fur, and so it's a bit of a mystery seeing what their expressions are at times. Yeah. Also, you noticed when you're doing editing, the different brush points all have a dot on the photo, and when you start doing a lot, they can start to get in the way of what you're looking at. And so when you click on them, they also show up red where they've been applied, and so occasionally you'll have to hit done, just so you can try and see the whole image without them obstructing your view. And you can also drag those brush points around, which is useful if you're just a little off the mark where you're applying the edit. Must shut off my email notifications next time. So doing a bit of a zoom in now, we can look for any spot flaws that we may not want. Now, it is cute that she has her muddy forepaws. Unfortunately, it looks like a bit of mud was sprayed up onto her eyebrows as well, but we can't do much about that. Sort of enhances to the image. Try and make the nose a little brighter, but not too bright. See, add clarity. It is better to try and separate each individual effect you do, because if you get reliant too much on one brush and you make one mistake, it's a bit hard to fix it all without destroying too much of your earlier work. And that's a pretty decent image. Yeah, so there's a few crumbs of dried mud, but you see that when you look really up close only, so it's bearable. Her collar as well. Let's see if we can add a bit of light to that shiny Vegas type bone. It's a small detail, but it's the small things that count. It's pretty good. So we don't want to overdo it on small parts, otherwise it looks unnatural, it stands out too much from the whole picture. So, although the subject does what it does when we click the shutter, we, the photographer and the editor, have a big impact on how the overall image appears to the viewer. It's an interpretation. Even when you just click the shutter and put the raw file straight onto Instagram, it's an interpretation that you're settling yourself with. So each choice is important. Lots of editing chickenpox here on little Heidi. Try and get that edging nice and smooth. Some love to upload photos straight away. Personally, I like to take a lot of pictures, and I often may have a backlog for quite a few months because I like to have a neutral view of my photos and what I like and don't like. Alright, so that there is pretty much our finished picture. It'll be good to see how it appears once we export it. So now we'll go into the export, and so in Lightroom, alright, I need to choose I've already chosen where the file will be saved, and I need an appropriate title. So let's have it Heide here. Simple enough name. or maybe with wet paws, because she is one of my favorite subjects, so give her a little distinguishment. Now, I already have preloaded a JPEG with my signature in it, which I had a graphic designer make for me, and I have it white and black version. It looks like a traditional handwritten signature, and I choose where to put it depending on the photo. So currently, the right hand side, lower corner, white to contrast with the black should be good, but I can change it depending on what I like. Okay, so it is a pretty decent picture. Now, I'm noticing that the photo seems to be a bit fuzzier, especially around the nose, than what it did in the editing program. And this might just be because I entered a photo competition recently and there was a file size limit I had to use. And so I might just need to up the pixels a little bit just to improve the image quality. So that's alright, no harm done. We can just have a second copy. So back to the program. Export again. Heide with wet paws number 2. How many pixels should we have? Bear with me. You can play around a bit depending on how much of a file size you want to take up with each picture. I think 300 per inch should be pretty good. Let's see, will this work out the ratio for us automatically? Just leave it at the 300 resolution for now and export it, and we'll just see the result. How much we like it or don't like it. Alright, so it's taking a bit longer to export now because it's a slightly larger file. Now this will be still a fairly small file, but if you have large photo files and you want to upload some of them into a website or something, a program that I often like to use is JPEG Mini Pro, and that means you can lessen your distortion of the image while still appearing good on a web page. And you can see the difference here, so the two file sizes, how the extra pixels do make a bit of a difference to how you see it. And maybe it would be less significant on looking on your phone, who knows, but I do like to be a bit of a perfectionist. Oh, by the way, when you're editing your photos, make sure you have the brightness on your computer set to maximum, because there's no use making edits if your vision of the picture is obscured by a low computer screen. At the same time, you'll also need to be aware that quite often people will be looking at their pictures on computers and phones without the full brightness, so you need to take that into consideration. You don't want it to be like the cameraman on Game of Thrones blaming Netflix or whatever streaming service for retro editing your work and making it too dark. But that's the finished product, I think. You can see my signature to the right, and I can keep that in or out as I choose, but it's good for branding in social media. And I do like how strong the grass blades appear in the foreground, and the softness of Heidi's fur, so not too much of a contrast between the harshness of the greenery and her face. So I've enjoyed this first episode, and I hope you'll join me for more. I will currently be releasing a new one every week, and so let's call it a day for now. I'm Matthew Dutzer. If you want to see more of the photo editor, please hit subscribe and tap the bell button so you get notified of future content. You can also look at my social media channels on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and I'll look forward to sharing more photos with you next time.